Denean Richards. Denean is a representative for JCP Natural Hazards Reports. It's a mandatory disclosure that has to be given to the buyer from the sellers. So we're going to ask Denean a couple of questions about the importance of the report and some specifics about JCP. Hi, Denean. Denean Richards of JCP. How are you, Denean?
I'm great, thanks, Sue.
Good. Hey, Denean, I've got a couple of questions about the Natural Hazards Report. The first thing I'm going to ask is why JCP, why your company, when we know that there are other competitors out there?
That's a great question. I get asked that all the time. And I travel all throughout Northern California and speak with literally thousands of people a year and get asked that question a lot. We started the industry in 1976. We were started by a geologist, James Prendergast, JCP himself, James C. Prendergast. And he started the industry with actually at the request of realtors in Santa Clara County. And around the same time, CAR came out with legislation stating that as a realtor you had to disclose flood zones and fault zones, and that's really how the disclosure industry was born, the natural hazard disclosure industry. Years later, other companies came down the road but have always followed in our footsteps.
Okay. All right. Let me ask you, is it mandatory? I guess you answered it is mandatory. The report has to be given from the seller to the buyer.
Right.
And what's the purpose?
That's a great question, because a lot of, I think, especially buyers and sellers don't really understand why they need this report, and some agents don't either. The report is mandatory because most of the disclosures in it have caused either loss of property or loss of life at some point in the past. So, for instance, I get asked all the time, why do we have to disclose if we're within a mile of a formerly used defense site? Well, because in, I think it was 1974 in San Diego County, I believe, 3 children were killed when they dug up an unexploded ordnance from an area, a field that had been a formerly used defense site. Why do we disclose dam inundation zones? You know, who's ever heard of a dam collapsing, at least in recent history? Actually, it's happened twice in California history where dams have collapsed and killed people and they had a lot of loss of property. So these disclosures are mandatory because they do affect your property, they affect the value and usability of your property, and they can affect the life of the people that live there from time to time.
Wow.
We live in a very geologically active state, and we also live in a very litigious state. So it's important to know what we're getting into and to protect ourselves as well.
Great. Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know those. That's let me ask you, what else is in the report? You talked about the dams, you talked about the ordinance. What else is in there? What big items are in the report?
Well, let me tell you what's required, because what's in the report and what's required are very different things. So what is required by law is that we disclose one federal map, which is a FEMA flood map, and then the rest are state zones that cover the dam inundation zone, the fire zones, there's 2 fire zones, and also the fault zone, and then seismic hazard zones, landslides and liquefactions. That's what's required by law. Now the thing is tricky about the natural hazard industry is that we're unregulated. So there's no governing agency looking over our shoulders to make sure that we're disclosing things the right way. You don't have to have a certification to do a natural hazard report. You don't have to have a license to be a natural hazard company. You don't even have to have a geological background. Another reason why JCP stands out so much, we were founded by a geologist. It's one of our binding principles of our company is that we have geologists, engineers, and geological specialists that work with us that are there to answer your questions, your clients' questions, and do the report. So we really know what we're doing, and that's why we've been able to continuously lead the industry for 33 years now. But over and above the state-mandated disclosures, we have city and county level disclosures as well. So for instance, this happened in Santa Clara County, where an agent who's been in business for a very long time sold a house in the Los Gatos foothills. In the state-mandated zones, and there's only a few of them, it said that there were no state-level fault zones. So they bought the house and later went to the county and said, we want to build a deck that will overlook the beautiful valley below us. And the county said, well, okay, you can build a deck possibly, but we have to do a $10,000 geological survey first. They said, you're in a fault zone. And the buyers said, well, nobody told us we were in a fault zone. Well, what's the deal? So, of course, they went home, reviewed their paperwork, found that in the JCP report, sure enough, on the statutory form, it said you're not in a state-level fault zone. So they called their realtor. Their realtor called us, spoke with one of our geologists, and he explained the report. That the first page is statutory. It's what is signed. It can't be changed. It's civil code. It has to look exactly like that. But when you go deeper into the report, you find the city and county level disclosures and all of the other disclosures that really make up the meat and guts of the report. And that's what varies from company to company. And that's what distinguishes JCP from all the other companies out there. We go farther and deeper into issues than other companies do. You'll find a lot of cheap reports out there for, oh, I'll get it to you in 15 minutes for $29.99. They're not going into the city and county level disclosures. And as a homeowner, that's what you really need to know. You need to know what's going to affect your property when you go and want to build and remodel. These days, we're probably going to be staying in our homes a little bit longer than we used to. We're not going to be buying and flipping anymore. We're going to be staying in our properties. Let's say you have a third child. You need to expand. You want to build out. You might not be able to in that particular property for whatever reason because of planning department.
Nice, nice. Now, when a situation like that comes up, when there is a question about what's in the report, the clients can give you a call.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we have a whole staff of geological specialists that are there. Our attorney's available for really specific cases if you need some guidance, but generally it doesn't get to that point. Most of the issues are handled by our geological staff.
Good. Let me ask you mentioned attorneys. Is there some sort of insurance or coverage that you have on these reports?
Again, we're unregulated, so you're not required to have a certain amount of insurance, but any good business person would have at least some insurance on their reports. The information in our reports is insured, and we have over $100 million of various levels of liability insurance because we're backed by the First American Corporation. So we're backed by a very, very strong Fortune 500 company. We've never used, in our 33 years of doing business, we've never used our E&O insurance. Our reports are that good.
Oh, wow, that's huge. Mm-hmm. That is huge. Let's just say, all right, if you were to close out and you were to say what is most important when a real estate agent gets this report, and then what's most important when a home seller or buyer receives this report, what would you say?
Read it. Read it. You gotta read it. Don't stop at just the statutory form, and I think that's a common mistake that a lot of agents make. They think everything that they need to know is on that first page that needs to be signed.
Right.
You gotta dig deeper than that. And we've outlined some really easy ways to help you do that, which if I can maybe come back and go over that another time. But you gotta read the report. You've gotta look deeper into it. If that agent in Los Gatos had dug deeper, she would have found that there's actually 5 different city and county level fault zones that run through those foothills, and their property was sitting right on top of one of them. And there's no state level zones. So you got to dig into the report. You got to read it.
Great. Great. Well, I think that's fantastic, Denean. Thanks so much. That gives us a much better insight into these reports and why we're handing them out to everyone. Thank you, Denean.
Thanks.